Daenerys. The heart was steaming in the cool evening air when Khal Drogo set it before her, raw and bloody. His arms were red to the elbow. Behind him, his blood riders knelt on the sand beside the corpse of the wild stallion, stone knives in their hands. The stallion's blood looked black in the flickering orange glare of the torches that ringed the high chalk walls of the pit. Dany touched the soft swell of her belly. Sweat beaded her skin and trickled down her brow. She could feel the old women watching her, the ancient crones of Vaes Dothrak, with eyes that shone dark as polished flint in their wrinkled faces. She must not flinch or look afraid. "I am the blood of the dragon," she told herself as she took the stallion's heart in both hands, lifted it to her mouth, and plunged her teeth into the tough, stringy flesh. Warm blood filled her mouth and ran down over her chin. The taste threatened to gag her, but she made herself chew and swallow. The heart of a stallion would make her son strong and swift and fearless, or so the Dothraki believed, but only if the mother could eat it all. If she choked on the blood or retched up the flesh, the omens were less favourable. The child might be stillborn, or come forth weak, deformed, or female. Her handmaids had helped her ready herself for the ceremony. Despite the tender mother's stomach that had afflicted her these last 2 moons, Dany had dined on bowls of half-clotted blood to accustom herself to the taste, and Irri made her chew strips of dried horseflesh until her jaws were aching. She'd starved herself for a day and a night before the ceremony in the hopes that hunger would help her keep down the raw meat. The wild stallion's heart was all muscle, and Dany had to worry it with her teeth and chew each mouthful a long time. No steel was permitted within the sacred confines of Vaes Dothrak, beneath the shadow of the Mother of Mountains. She had to rip the heart apart with teeth and nails. Her stomach roiled and heaved, yet she kept on, her face smeared with the heart's blood that sometimes seemed to explode against her lips. Khal Drogo stood over her as she ate, his face as hard as a bronze shield. His long black braid was shiny with oil. He wore gold rings in his mustache, gold bells in his braid, and a heavy belt of solid gold medallions round his waist, but his chest was bare. She looked at him whenever she felt her strength failing, looked at him and chewed and swallowed, chewed and swallowed, chewed and swallowed. Toward the end, Dany thought she glimpsed a fierce pride in his dark, almond-shaped eyes, but she couldn't be sure. The Khal's face did not often betray the thoughts within. And finally it was done. Her cheeks and fingers were sticky as she forced down the last of it. Only then did she turn her eyes back to the old women, the crones of Dosh Khaleen. "Kalaka Dothre Marana," she proclaimed in her best Dothraki. "A prince rides inside me." She had practiced the phrase for days with her handmaid Jiqui. The oldest of the crones, a bent and shriveled stick of a woman with a single black eye, raised her arms on high. "Kalaka Dothre!" she shrieked. "The prince is riding." "He is riding!" the other women answered. "Rak! Rak! Rakhaj!" they proclaimed. A boy, a strong boy. Bells rang, a sudden clangor of bronze birds. A deep-throated war horn sounded its long, low note. The old women began to chant. Underneath their painted leather vests, their withered dugs swayed back and forth, shiny with oil and sweat. The eunuchs who served them threw bundles of dried grasses on a great bronze brazier, and clouds of fragrant smoke rose up toward the moon and the stars. The Dothraki believed that the stars were horses made of fire, a great herd that galloped across the sky by night. As the smoke ascended, the chanting died away, and the ancient crone closed her single eye, the better to peer into the future. The silence that fell was complete. Dany could hear the distant call of night birds, the hiss and crackle of the torches, the gentle lapping of water from the lake. The Dothraki stared at her with eyes of night, waiting. Khal Drogo laid his hand on Dany's arm. She could feel the tension in his fingers. Even a Khal as mighty as Drogo could know fear when the Dosh Khaleen peered into the smoke of the future. At her back her handmaids fluttered anxiously. Finally the crone opened her eye and lifted her arms. "I have seen his face and heard the thunder of his hooves," she proclaimed in a thin, wavery voice. "The thunder of his hooves!" the others chorused. As swift as the wind he rides, and behind him his khalasar covers the earth. Men without number, the ankhs rising in their hands like blades of razor grass. Fierce as a storm this prince will be. His enemies will tremble before him, and their wives will weep tears of blood, and render their flesh in grief. The bells in his hair will sing his coming, and the milkmen in the stone tents will fear his name. The old woman trembled and looked at Dany almost as if she were afraid. The prince is riding, and he shall be the stallion who mounts the world. The stallion who mounts the world! The onlookers cried in echo until the night rang to the sound of their voices. The one-eyed crone peered at Dany. What shall he be called, the stallion who mounts the world? She stood to answer. He shall be called Rhaego, she said, using the words that Jiqui had taught her. Her hands touched the swell beneath her breast protectively as a roar went up from the Dothraki. Rhaego! They screamed. Rhaego! 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 The name was still ringing in her ears as Khal Drogo led her from the pit. His blood riders fell in behind them. A procession followed them out into the God's Way, the broad grassy road that ran through the heart of Vaes Dothrak, from the Horse Gate to the Mother of Mountains. The crones of the Dosh Khaleen came first, with their eunuchs and slaves. Some supported themselves with tall carved staffs as they struggled along on ancient, shaking legs, while others walked as proud as any horse lord. Each of the old women had been a Khaleesi once. When their lord husbands died and a new Khal took his place at the front of his riders, with a new Khaleesi mounted beside him, they were sent here, to reign over the vast Dothraki nation. Even the mightiest of Khals bowed to the wisdom and authority of the Dosh Khaleen. Still, it gave Dany the shivers to think that one day she might too be sent to join them, whether she willed it or not. Behind the wise women came the others, Khal Ogo and his son, the Khalaka Fogo, Khal Jommo and his wives, the chief men of Drogo's khalasar, Dany's handmaids, the Khal's servants and slaves, and more. Bells rang and drums beat a stately cadence as they marched along the God's Way. Stolen heroes and the gods of dead peoples brooded the darkness beyond the road. Alongside the procession, slaves ran lightly through the grass with torches in their hands, and the flickering flames made the great monument seem almost alive. What is meaning, name, Rhaego? Khal Drogo asked as they walked, using the common tongue of the Seven Kingdoms. She had been teaching him a few words when she could. Drogo was quick to learn when he put his mind to it, so his accent was so thick and barbarous that neither Ser Jorah nor Viserys could understand a word he said. My brother Rhaegar was a fierce warrior, my son in stars, she told him. He died before I was born. Ser Jorah says that he was the last of the dragons. Khal Drogo looked down at her. His face was a copper mask, yet underneath the long black moustache, drooping beneath the weight of its gold rings, she thought she glimpsed the shadow of a smile. His good name, Daenerys, wife, moon of my life, he said. They rode to the lake the Dothraki called the Womb of the World, surrounded by a fringe of reeds, its water still and calm. 1,000 years ago, Jiqui told her, the first man had emerged from its depths, riding upon the back of the first horse. The procession waited on the grassy shore as Dany stripped and let her soiled clothing fall to the ground. Naked, she stepped gingerly into the water. Eerie said the lake had no bottom, but Dany felt soft mud squishing between her toes as she pushed through the tall reeds. The moon floated on the still black waters, shattering and reforming as her ripples washed over it. Goose pimples rose on her pale skin as the coldness crept up her thighs and kissed her lower lips. The stallion's blood had dried on her hands and around her mouth. Dany cupped her fingers and lifted the sacred waters over her head, cleansing herself and the child inside her, while the Khal and the others looked on. She heard the old women of Dosh Khaleen muttering to each other as they watched, and wondered what they were saying. When she emerged from the lake, shivering and dripping, her handmaid Doria hurried toward her with a rope of painted sand silk, but Khal Drogo waved her away. He was looking on her swollen breasts and the curve of her belly with approval, and Dany could see the shape of his manhood pressing through his horsehide trousers, below the heavy gold medallions of his belt. She went to him and helped him unlace. Then her huge cowl took her by the hips and lifted her into the air, as he might lift a child. The bells in his hair rang softly. Dany wrapped her arms round his shoulders and pressed her face against his neck as he thrust himself inside her. 3 quick strokes and it was done. "The stallion who mounts the world," Drogo whispered hoarsely. His hands still smelled of horse blood. He bit at her throat hard in the moment of his pleasure, and when he lifted her off, his seed filled her and trickled down the inside of her thighs. Only then was Dorea permitted to drape her in her scented sand silk, and Eerie to fit soft slippers to her feet. Khal Drogo laced himself up and spoke a command, and horses were brought to the lake shore. Kaholo had the honour of helping the Khaleesi onto her silver. Drogo spurred his stallion and set off down the God's Way beneath the moon and stars. On her silver, Dany easily kept pace. The silk tenting that roofed Khal Drogo's hall had been rolled up tonight, and the moon followed them inside. Flames leapt 10 feet in the air with 3 huge stone-lined fire pits. The air was thick with the smells of roasting meat and curdled fermented mare's milk. The hall was crowded and noisy when they entered, the cushions packed with those whose rank and name were not sufficient to allow them at the ceremony. As Dany rode beneath the arched entry and up the centre aisle, every eye was on her. The Dothraki screamed out comments on her belly and her breasts, hailing the life within her. She could not understand all they shouted, but one phrase came clear. "The stallion that mounts the world," she heard, bellowed 1,000 times. The sounds of drums and horns swirled up into the night. Half-clothed women spun and danced on the low tables, amid joints of meat and platters piled high with plums and dates and pomegranates. Many of the men were drunk on clotted mare's milk, yet Dany knew no Araks would clash tonight. Not here in the sacred city, where blades and bloodshed were forbidden. Khal Drogo dismounted and took his place on the high bench. Khal Jomo and Khal Ogo, who'd been in Vaes Dothrak with their Khalasars when they arrived, were given seats of high honour next to Drogo, on his right and his left. The blood riders of the 3 Khals sat below them, and farther down, Khal Jomo's 4 wives. Dany climbed off her silver and gave the reins to one of the slaves. As Dorea and Eerie changed her cushion, she searched for her brother. Even across the length of the crowded hall, Viserys should have been conspicuous with his pale skin, silvery hair, and beggar's rags, but she did not see him anywhere. Her glance roamed the crowded tables near the walls where the men whose braids were even shorter than their manhoods sat on frayed rugs and flat cushions round the low tables, but all the faces she saw had black hair and copper skin. She spied Ser Jorah Mormont near the centre of the hall, close to the middle fire pit. It was a place of respect, if not high honour. The Dothraki esteemed the knight's prowess with a sword. Dany sent Jiqui to bring him to her table. Mormont came at once and went to one knee before her. "Khaleesi," he said, "I am yours to command." She patted the stuffed horse-side cushion beside her. "Sit and talk with me." "You honour me." The knight seated himself cross-legged on the cushion. A slave knelt before him, offering a wooden platter full of ripe figs. Ser Jorah took one and bit it in half. "Where is my brother?" Dany asked. "He ought to have come by now for the feast." "I saw his grace this morning," he told her. "He told me he was going to the Western Market in search of wine." "Wine?" Dany said doubtfully. Viserys could not abide the taste of fermented mare's milk the Dothraki drank. She knew that, and he was oft at the bazaars these days, drinking with the traders who came in with the great caravans from east and west. He seemed to find their company more congenial than hers. "Wine," Ser Jorah confirmed, "and he has some thought to recruit men for his army from the sellswords who guard the caravans." A serving girl laid a blood pie in front of him, and he attacked it with both hands. "Is that wise?" she asked. "He has no gold to pay soldiers. What if he's betrayed?" Caravan guards were seldom troubled much by thoughts of honour, and the usurper in King's Landing would pay well for her brother's head. "You ought to have gone with him, to keep him safe. You are his sworn sword." "We are in Vaes Dothrak," he reminded her. "No man may carry a blade here or shed a man's blood." "Yet men die," she said. "Drogo told me. Some of the traders have eunuchs with them, huge men who strangle thieves with wisps of silk. That way no blood is shed, and the gods are not angered." "Then let us hope your brother will be wise enough not to steal anything." Ser Jorah wiped the grease off his mouth with the back of his hand and leaned close over the table. "He had planned to take your dragon's eggs until I warned him I'd cut off his hand if he so much touched them." For a moment Dany was so shocked she had no words. "My eggs? But they're mine. Magister Illyrio gave them to me, a bride gift. Why would Viserys want... They're only old stones." "The same could be said of rubies and diamonds and fire opals, princess. And dragon's eggs are rarer by far. Those traders he's been drinking with would sell their own manhoods for even one of those stones. And with all three, Viserys could buy as many sellswords as he might need." Dany had not known, not even suspected. "Then he should have them. He does not need to steal them. He need only ask. He is my brother, and my true king." "He is your brother," Ser Jorah acknowledged. "You do not understand, sir," she said. "My mother died giving me birth, and my father and my brother Rhaegar even before that. I would never have known so much as their names if Viserys had not been there to tell me. He was the only one left. The only one. He is all I have." "Once," said Ser Jorah. "No longer, Khaleesi. You belong to the Dothraki now. In your womb rides the stallion who mounts the world." He held out his cup, and a slave filled it with fermented mare's milk, sour-smelling and thick with clots. Dany waved her away. Even the smell of it made her feel ill, and she would take no chances of bringing up the horse heart she'd just forced herself to eat. "What does it mean?" she asked. "What is this stallion? Everyone was shouting it at me, but I don't understand." "The stallion is the Carl of Carls promised in ancient prophecy, child. He will unite the Dothraki into a single Khalasar and ride to the ends of the earth. So it was promised. All the people of the world will be his herd." "Oh," Dany said in a small voice. Her hand smoothed her robe down over the swell of her stomach. "I named him Rhaego." "A name to make the usurper's blood run cold." Suddenly Doria was tugging at her elbow. "Milady," she whispered urgently. "Your brother." Dany looked down the length of the long roofless hall, and there he was, striding toward her. From the lurch in his step she could tell at once that Viserys had found his wine, and something that passed for courage. He was wearing his scarlet silks, soiled and travel-stained. His cloak and gloves were black velvet faded from the sun. His boots were dry and cracked, his silver-blonde hair matted and tangled. A long sword swung from his belt in a leather scabbard. The Dothraki eyed the sword as he passed. Dany heard curses and threats and angry muttering rising all round her like a tide. The music died away in a nervous stammering of drums. A sense of dread closed round her heart. "Go to him," she commanded Ser Jorah. "Stop him. Bring him here. Tell him he can have the dragon's eggs if that's what he wants." The knight rose swiftly to his feet. "Where's my sister?" Viserys shouted, his voice thick with wine. "I've come for her feast. How dare you presume to eat without me? No one enters before the king. Where is she? That whore can't hide from the dragon." He stopped beside the largest of 3 fire pits, peering round at the faces of the Dothraki. There were 5,000 men in the hall, but only a handful knew the common tongue. Yet even if his words were incomprehensible, you had only to look at him to know that he was drunk. Ser Jorah went to him swiftly, whispered something in his ear, and took him by the arm, but Viserys wrenched free. "Keep your hands off me! No one touches the dragon without my leave." Dany glanced anxiously up at the high bench. Khal Drogo was saying something to the other Khals beside him. Khal Jomo grinned, and Khal Ogo began to guffaw loudly. The sound of laughter made Viserys lift his eyes. "Khal Drogo," he said thickly, his voice almost polite. "I'm here for the feast." He staggered away from Ser Jorah, making to join the three Khals on the high bench. Khal Drogo rose, spat out a dozen words in Dothraki faster than Dany could understand, and pointed. "Khal Drogo says your place is not on the high bench," Ser Jorah translated for her brother. "Khal Drogo says your place is there." Viserys glanced where the Khal was pointing. At the back of the long hall, in a corner by the wall, deep in the shadow so better men need not look upon them, sat the lowest of the low. Raw, unblooded boys, old men with clouded eyes and stiff joints, the dim-witted and the maimed. Far from the meat and farther from the honour. "That is no place for a king," her brother declared. "His place," Khal Drogo answered in the common tongue that Dany had taught him. "For Sorefoot King." He clapped his hands together. "A cart! Bring cart for Khal Ragat." 5,000 Dothraki began to laugh and shout. Ser Jorah was standing by Viserys, screaming in his ear, but the roar in the hall was so thunderous that Dany could not hear what he was saying. Her brother shouted back, and the two men grappled until Mormont knocked Viserys bodily on the ground. Her brother drew his sword. The bared steel shone a fearful red in the glare from the fire pits. "Keep away from me," Viserys hissed. Ser Jorah backed off a step, and her brother climbed unsteadily to his feet. He waved the sword over his head, the borrowed blade that Magister Illyrio had given him to make him seem more kingly. Dothraki was shrieking at him from all sides, screaming vile curses. Dany gave a wordless cry of terror. She knew what a drawn sword meant here, even if her brother did not. Her voice made Viserys turn his head, and he saw her for the first time. "There she is," he said, smiling. He stalked toward her, slashing at the air as if to cut a path through the wall of enemies, though no one tried to bar his way. "The blade! You must not!" she begged him. "Please, Viserys. It is forbidden. Put down the sword and come share my cushions. There's drink, food. Is it the dragon's eggs you want? You can have them. Only throw away the swords." "Do as she tells you, fool," Ser Jorah shouted, "before you get us all killed." Viserys laughed. "They can't kill us. They can't shed blood here in the sacred city. But I can." He laid the point of his sword between Dany's breasts and slid it downward over the curve of her belly. "I want what I came for," he told her. "I want the crown he promised me. He bought you, but he never paid for you. Tell him I want what I bargained for, or I'm taking you back. You and the eggs both. He can keep his bloody foal. I'll cut the bastard out and leave it for him." The sword point pushed through her silks and pricked at her navel. Viserys was weeping, she saw, weeping and laughing, both at the same time. This man who had once been her brother. Distantly, as from far away, Dany heard her handmaid Jhiqui sobbing in fear, pleading that she dared not translate, that the Khal would bind her and drag her behind his horse all the way up to the Mother of Mountains. She put her arm round the girl. "Don't be afraid," she said. "I shall tell him." She did not know if she had enough words, yet when she was done, Khal Drogo spoke a few brusque sentences in Dothraki, and she knew he understood. The son of her life stepped down from the high bench. "What did he say?" the man who had been her brother asked her, flinching. It had grown so silent in the hall that she could hear the bells in Khal Drogo's hair, chiming softly with each step he took. His blood riders followed him like three copper shadows. Daenerys had gone cold all over. "He says you shall have a splendid golden crown that men shall tremble to behold." Viserys smiled and lowered his sword. That was the saddest thing, the thing that tore at her afterward, the way he smiled. That was all I wanted, he said. What was promised? When the sun of her life reached her, Dany slid an arm round his waist. The Carl said a word, and his blood riders leapt forward. Kotho seized the man who had been her brother by the arms. Hago shattered his wrist with a single sharp twist of his huge hands. Kaholo pulled the sword from his limp fingers. Even now Viserys didn't understand. "No!" he shouted. "You cannot touch me! I am the dragon, and I will be crowned!" Khal Drogo unfastened his belt. The medallions were pure gold, massive and ornate, each one as large as a man's hand. He shouted a command. Cook slaves pulled a heavy iron stew pot from the fire pit, dumped the stew onto the ground and returned the pot to the flames. Drogo tossed in the belt and watched without expression as the medallions turned red and began to lose their shape. She could see fires dancing in the onyx of his eyes. A slave handed him a pair of thick horsehair mittens, and he pulled them on, never so much as looking at the man. Viserys began to scream, the high, wordless scream of the coward facing death. He kicked and twisted, whimpered like a dog, and wept like a child, but the Dothraki held him tight between them. Ser Jorah made his way to Dany's side. He put a hand on her shoulder. "Turn away, my princess, and I beg you." "No." She folded her arms across the swell of her belly protectively. At the very last, Viserys looked at her. "Sister, please, Dany, tell them. Make them. Sweet sister." When the gold was half melted and starting to run, Drogo reached into the flames, snatched out the pot. "Crown!" he roared. "Here, a crown for Cart King!" and upended the pot over the head of the man who had been her brother. The sound Viserys Targaryen made when that hideous iron helmet covered his face was like nothing human. His feet hammered a frantic beat against the dirt floor, slowed, stopped. Thick globs of molten gold dripped down onto his chest, setting the scarlet silk to smouldering. Yet no drop of blood was spilled. He was no dragon, Dany thought, curiously calm. Fire cannot kill a dragon.
Viserys, a total dumbass till the end.
Yeah, he really should have looked at them social cues that the Dothraki were giving him.
Yeah, and maybe not threaten to kill the Khale's child.
The stallion who will mount the world.
Yes.
Don't threaten the man's baby. Especially right in front of the man.
Yeah.
When what he does for a living is rape and pillage other communities.
Right? Oh, he can't do anything. He can't shed blood here. Didn't think that one through.
I thought that was
There's
interesting.
other ways to die.
Martin foreshadows that heavily, because Dany mentions it twice that you can't shed blood.
Mm-hmm.
And then she talks about, like, the eunuchs that strangle people.
With the silks.
Yeah, like, there are ways to die that do not spill blood. It's not just about swords, guys. You don't, like...
Total Westerosi thinking.
This was also interesting in the sense that,
I guess Cersei would probably fit in quite well.
Have Vaes Dothrak?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Poisoning everyone.
See, they need a brain like hers to go to Vaes Dothrak when, like, someone needs someone killed. They just need to ask Cersei, like, yo, how would you do this? What would you do?
Poison. Poison is what I would do. Well, allegedly.
Allegedly, right. We can't confirm that.
Mm-hmm.
But according to what we've read so far,
allegedly, she more or less...
She knows what she's doing in that department.
Yeah, she more or less confirmed that. She killed Jon Arryn.
Yeah, that Eddard chapter kind of signed and sealed that one.
Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting, the whole discussion of while Dany is eating the horse heart. Like, she talks about how she did this to prepare, and she repeatedly said this over and over. It makes it seem like this is very much like a political performance that she's putting on.
Yeah.
And it's all about the theatrics of the event.
Mm-hmm. And apparently the old crone was pretty shocked to know that her child will be the stallion that mounts the world.
Right, she was like almost freaked out about it. Like, oh!
Which is really just a polite way of saying the horse that will fuck the world. It's gonna fuck everyone.
Yes, he's going to mount the world. That's a polite way of saying, like, he is going to fuck the world and everyone will be his herd and his children.
In other words, Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
There you go, that was Genghis Khan.
Dany is giving
Stallion
birth to
to
Genghis
mount the
Khan.
world, yes.
Yeah, right? He did have the largest empire ever. And
Yep.
how many people can claim... Isn't it like 1% of the population can attribute their ancestry to Genghis Khan?
I think it was like 10% of like Eastern Europe or like Asia.
It's some crazy...
Has some percentage of Genghis Khan's genetics. It's something like
it's something crazy like that.
It's a very large number, like a ridiculously large number.
It's something that no human being should be able to accomplish.
Yes.
And yet...
He did it.
He did it. Dany, too, like, just like, if he wants the eggs, he can have the eggs. Like, don't give him your eggs! You stop it!
Those are your dragon eggs. You keep them.
They're yours! You stop! Don't...
You deserve nice things, too.
Right? Not fair. You can see, like, Jorah's trying to tell her, like, keep the eggs, Dany, keep them.
I know. Jorah's, like, getting frustrated with this. Like, what the... Give him your... No! Don't give him your eggs.
Right? Jorah's like, I literally stopped him from taking the eggs. And now you're gonna give him to... No! But... Jorah must have been very frustrated throughout this entire situation.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Because not only is he trying to convince Dany, like, your brother's an idiot. Stop. To then, like, no, Jorah, save my brother, protect him.
Do I have to? Alright. Fucking God. It's... To a degree, I guess I kind of know what it's like, you know, anyone who's gone out drinking and you're like the last one to get drunk out of your friends and you gotta babysit.
Yep.
That's basically how Jorah is.
Yep.
Like, Jesus, I should have drank faster. Alright, come on, let's go, buddy.
I should have had 3 glasses of that fermented mare's milk. Dang it.
Yep.
It's interesting Martin decides to use the language. As soon as Viserys threatens her baby, immediately she talks to Drogo, and then Viserys becomes the man who had once been her brother.
Yeah.
Like, it was over. You threatened her child. It's donezo now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Family ties are kaput. You severed them.
And Jorah makes a really good point. Jorah's like, Viserys is not all you have. Look at what you have. You have...
Yeah, you got a cow. You got a baby coming along.
You got me.
And you got... Yeah.
I'm your
Sworn sword.
big defender, dude. He is a bear.
Yeah. Colonel Bear.
I feel like this, Dany just really finally sees Viserys for who he really is.
Took her long enough.
Yeah, it took a...
Jesus.
Yeah, it took a while.
Would have been great if Drogo just started laughing after he gave him the crown, like it was just a joke. Haha, get it? Gold crown? He has a crown.
Drogo really is... He just doesn't give an F about committing any kinds of violence.
No.
He's like stone expressionless the entire time while he's like, I'm going to melt this metal and then put it on someone's head. And which sounds like a horrible...
I'm going to melt this metal while the person sits there and watches and knows that they're about to die from it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is a great...
Calm as a cucumber.
I think it's a great comparison though, because you have this dude who has no remorse to do something like that. Well, again, this situation I think is different because he threatened to kill his child.
Yeah.
So it's understandable, but
Yeah.
Outside of that,
he threatens his...
will go and rape and pillage for fun. But the same man who don't give a fuck about anything is taking the time to learn the common tongue for Dany.
That's true.
I think that shows like how much he actually cares about her. You know?
Yeah.
They're surrounded by Dothraki, really, in that situation.
He doesn't need to.
He doesn't need to.
Tongue.
She should learn. She has more use of that. So
Right.
There's no other reason for him to learn the common tongue.
Other than to make her happy.
Yes. Other than to make it easier for her to, like, communicate. She wants to just speak Westerosi.
You know what I think is interesting, though? Do you think that Dany really loves Drogo? Or does Dany love Drogo in the sense of that he's her husband, she loves him, and he also provides her with everything she needs and with protection and safety?
Whether she really loves him or she's just like, well, if I don't love him, I'm probably gonna die.
No, I mean in the sense of like why can't it be a little bit of both? Not just that she loves him, but she also understands that her position depends on him.
Oh, well, yeah. But at the same time, are you talking about her going to be one of the...
No, I'm saying like
the
she...
crones
No,
and,
I'm saying like her position and safety in life depends on her marriage to this dude.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, basically.
So does she really love him, or does she appreciate the important role that he plays in her life to keep her safe and protected? Or why not both?
Isn't that just part of love, though?
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, why can't it be both? I'm not saying it's one or the other. I'm just spouting.
That's what I mean. It's hard to say because it's like part of it in any situation, I think.
Also, it's cute that she calls him, what is it, son of her life?
Yes, son of her life.
Son of her life. I also do think, like, she was like, I thought I saw him smile a little bit, but maybe I was wrong. Like, is Dany imagining it, or is Khal Drogo actually, like, proud? Like, you ate that horse heart like a champ, Dany. You took it all. Good for you.
Oh, I think 100% he is. Like I was saying, I think this chapter really showed that Khal Drogo is...
He's, like, invested. He's invested.
Whether or not Dany loves him, we know Khal Drogo really loves Dany.
Yeah, I think he does. I think Khal Drogo saw Dany as, like, she's this exotic, blonde, purple-haired...
She's silver-haired. Purple-eyed.
Yeah. Silver-haired, purple-eyed. Like, almost trophy thing. Like, no one has a Khaleesi like I got. And it just kind of evolved into this other thing.
I mean, now that I've thought about it more, I think Dany is definitely invested in, like, the lifestyle. I guess that's a better way to kind of phrase it, whether she's in love with Khal Drogo, or if she's only in love with Khal Drogo and she's just doing this because of that and to have her place, or if she enjoys the lifestyle.
She doesn't seem too thrilled about the whole Dosh Khaleen thing.
No, she doesn't.
She's like, I don't know about that.
But everything else, I feel like she's really embraced.
Yeah, she has. The culture, the way of life.
Dothraki.
Yeah. She's really made the Dothraki and the people like her people and like her home.
Exactly.
Very much.
She's not like Viserys, who's just like, can we get out of here? When can we go home? When do I go get my crown?
Yeah. Yeah. And then at the very end, she watches him die and she's like, he was no dragon.
Fire can't hurt the dragon.
little cold, Danny.
So. Cold. No, it was hot.
But sometimes some things are so cold that they're hot. Is that what a Song of Ice and Fire really is? At the end of the day, it's just dry ice. It's so cold that it burns. It's a song about dry ice.
It's nitrogen, liquid nitrogen. It's so cold that it burns. I forgot what I was gonna say.
I know, sorry.
So if Viserys wasn't the dragon, who is the dragon?
Who is the dragon? I don't know. According to everyone else,
Joffrey, maybe?
Rhaegar was the dragon.
Mm-hmm.
According to everyone. Maybe there aren't any more dragons. Maybe that was it. No more dragons.
Maybe.
Why would Joffrey be the dragon? He's not a Targaryen.
Well, no, but
He's a lion. He's not a dragon, and he's not a stag. He's a lion. I'm going to have all his lion babies, not his dragon babies.
maybe Tyrion's the dragon.
Why would Tyrion be the dragon?
I don't know.
You're just pulling names out of your butt right now.
Maybe Jon's the dragon. Maybe Eddard's the dragon.
No.
Eddard is the ice dragon.
Eddard is the ice. Catelyn is the fish dragon.
The sea serpent.
She's
Gyarados.
She's Sisu. Liza's just a fish. She's not a dragon. She's just a fish.
She's a magic carp.
She's a magic carp. Flopping all over the place. Sweet Robin! Flop, flop, flop.
Catelyn's Gyarados. She's magic carp.
Confirmed. I believe it.
Liza used breastfeed.
It
wasn't
not
very
super
effective.
effective. Gross! Gross!
And on that note, whose chapter are we gonna go see?
The ice dragon himself. The Ned that rides.
The Ned that rides.
Not very well, though. Apparently. Because his horse fell on him. But yes.
The Ned that rides to the ground.
The Ned that rides badly.
The Ned that rode.
The Ned that rode. The Ned that took more than half of a book to figure out the mystery.
I know.
Took long enough.
My God.
Took long enough.
We're talking about how dense Viserys was, but let's be honest
I feel like Viserys could have figured out Joffrey's parentage much faster. No offense, but I feel like Viserys probably could have had that.
Well, I think Viserys probably wouldn't have cared.
He probably wouldn't have cared.
He would have just been like, I'm just gonna kill him.
But he has enough family history to kind of back him up and be like,
Yeah. But Eddard, you've been friends with Robert for how long, and you couldn't tell?
How many of Robert's bastards has he probably seen over the years? And he still was like, oh yeah, Joffrey's blonde. Totally Robert's kid.
Yeah. Green eyes. Well, he has green eyes, right?
Who, Joffrey?
Yeah.
Yeah. They all do, I think. All the kids do. I think they're blonde with green eyes.
I'm telling you, I think Robert just doesn't care.
I don't think Robert has enough sober brain cells to even think about it.
Exactly.
I just don't think he even... Cersei has 3. None of them look like Robert.
But hey, good news for Cersei. None of them have, like, a third arm growing out of their neck.
Or 13 fingers, or the Habsburg jaw.
Or, like, some weird lip growing out of their forehead.
Yeah. That's
true.
true.
Just a flap.
Yeah. I mean, by all accounts so far in the book, Joffrey's very tall and very handsome.
Mm-hmm.
And Marcella's very cute and pretty, and Tommen's a chonk, but that's fine.
None of them look like sloth.
Oh.
Would have been great if one did, though.
There's another Baratheon child. We don't talk about that one.
Arya's gonna stumble on him in the dungeons one of these days.
When she's out catching cats, she's gonna be like, I saw a monster. Really, Arya? Again? No, I really did. Its eyes were like this. Its ears were pointed. But yeah, we'll get to hang out with Ned next time and see how that conversation with Cersei went down.
See how that plan of Eddard's works out.
Doing the honorable thing.
Will Cersei run away?
Robert will come back and Ned will tell him, and Robert will be like, yeah, dude, I know. I don't care. I just don't want to be the king anymore. I don't care.
Keeps her occupied and out of my business.